Welcome to Unapologetically ADHD. I'm Patricia Young, MSW, and I'm an ADHD former therapist and current coach.
I'm Alex McLaughlin, MSW and LICSW, and I'm an ADHD therapist. This is a podcast with two friends processing what it's like to live in body minds that diverge from neuronormative standards and everything that comes with it, the good, the bad, and the beautifully messy.
We aim to release 2 or more episodes per month. This podcast is not meant to be a substitute for help from a licensed mental health practitioner. Hey there, how are you? Today, Alex and I are going to be talking about how we met, what our fears and thoughts are about the podcast. We haven't released any episodes yet. By the time you hear this, we will have. But I listened to episode 0 last night and I had a big reaction, so I want to talk about that. And Alex and I are also going to talk about our relationship with time and something that came up for us today. But first, I want to check in with you. How are you doing, Alex?
I'm a little frazzled still. Yeah, like I was telling you before we recorded, I was running behind, which, makes me frazzled. And then if I know, someone's waiting for me, then I get frazzled. So like I still have like residual frazzledness, if that's a word. And I am half crocheting. So hopefully, the like rhythmic movement will help my nervous system come back to, I don't want to say baseline, because sometimes my baseline is not in my window of tolerance, but hopefully, I'll come back down into a window of tolerance. How are you?
I am doing okay. I always have a hard time when people ask me that question because I don't know. It had a really nice morning. I went to breakfast with a friend and we don't connect very often. I think since we're talking about this now, should we just jump into our relationship with time and how it's different and what came up?
Sure.
I have a very different relationship to time than you do. And part of what we talked about is although it's unlikely that the dynamic will change, and I'll let you talk a little bit more about that. And I don't mean that in a negative way. As long as there's room for us to talk about it, that's what's important to me. And because I'm so afraid of using ableist language. So if I do, and you're comfortable letting me know, Alex, please say something. You have my permission.
Okay.
I was raised that being on time is really important. And I tend to get places early, not always, but for the most part, just because that's just how I am. And I seem to be in relationship with a number of people that have a very different relationship to time than I do. And it's generally not okay to say something when I'm having feelings about someone being late. So I've learned to just manage it internally. And today we were going to meet at noon, and then you asked if we could meet at 1, and then we were going to meet at 1, and then it just kept getting pushed forward a little bit. And my son arrived in the meantime, and where I record from, I could see that he got here, but I didn't want to go out and say hello because I wanted to make sure that I was here on time. So by the time we did record, I was having some feelings about it, but wasn't going to say anything. And you asked how that was for me. And it felt really nice to have permission. And then I asked how that was for you hearing me say that. And I want to give you a chance to participate in the conversation.
Yeah. I mean, I think both of my parents, I'm pretty sure, are ADHDers, and I think they say that openly. So I think it's okay that I say that. But my mom in particular is like me, where she has a really hard time with time. And so I think I just also have that, like my orientation to time and how long things take is like so off. Like I legitimately thought I was going to be on time, and then I was like eating food and like checking in with my friend that was here, who's going to like help me with stuff. And I was like, oh my gosh, it's like 8 minutes until, or like 7 minutes until I have to do the podcast. And so I was like, okay, I definitely have enough time to like change, because I still had to change because I had just woken up recently. And then I started doing something and I was like, oh, I need to give them more direction to like do this other thing. So then I started doing another task, and then that led into another task, and I was like, I think I texted you and I was like, "It's gonna be 10 minutes." And then the 10-minute mark hit, and then I saw your text that you were gonna say hi to your son, and I was like, "Okay, like, I can relax a little bit." And I guess I didn't know, like, how long you were gonna say hi to your son, and so I, like, finished doing the one task, and, yeah, then by the time I started to log in, it was, like, 15 after, and then the cords that I needed, I couldn't find, and then yeah, so I just, like it got I think by the time we logged in, it was, like, 20 after, and so yeah, like, I felt the whole time I felt anxious because I know that you have a different orientation to time, and I felt like I was letting you down, and so, like, I think that led to the frazzledness, and then, I wanted to check in because I know that you have a different relationship to time, and so, like, yeah, it's hard to hear when people are, like, disappointed, and it's hard because I legitimately thought I was gonna be 10 minutes late, and it's like, I know that I need to work on my relationship to time, and also, like, we were talking about actually in the group that we met in, this past week, or was it last week? But we were talking about how we can do for those of us that have maybe more ADHD relationships to time. I've kind of just accepted that my relationship is what it is, and, like, I feel like I'm normally not that late, like, it's, like, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, normally it's not as late as I was today, and so I think it's hard because our society is oriented so much around time, and it's hard because, like, I wanna honor people's time, and also every time I try to do that, it just, like, fails, and so it's like I'm setting myself up for failure. I don't know. So I have lots of feelings and thoughts about it, but I
Mm.
feel like I just kind of info dumped a bunch, so I'm gonna pause there and see if you're, yeah, having thoughts you wanna share.
Well, I think that this is really common, and my guess is that listeners can identify to this regardless of I was gonna say which side, but I didn't wanna make it sound like it's on my side and your side, but depending on how you're wired and what you struggle with. And I would suspect that if you tend to be more time-oriented, and I don't know, is there a better word that I can use? Because I know that it's not that you're not time-oriented, Alex.
I mean, that language doesn't feel ableist to me. I don't know if it might feel ableist to listeners, I don't actually know, but I'm fine with that language.
Yeah, thank you. I would imagine that one's autism and sense of what is right and wrong can also come into that. My husband and my kids have this saying that if you're on time, you're late. So that is ableist, and that is their belief. So there is a rule there that I would imagine that many autistics can fall into. And then we get into a right wrong. And how my OCD shows up often is it doesn't show up in my relationship with you in this way, but is a sense of caring. If you
Mm,
cared about me, then you would prioritize me and you would be here on time, which
mm,
I understand now that's not where I come from, but at one point I did. So there often is a progression around, are you making up a story around the person not showing up at the time that you expected them to and what that meaning is, and does that affect your sense of value or your sense of meaning? And generally, it has nothing to do with you.
yeah, but it does affect you,
Sure.
like, as a recipient of like, my mom is, like I mentioned, like, really the same as me and sometimes
Mhm,
quite worse. No offense. That sounds bad, worse. Like, she has a much harder time with time than I do.
mhm.
There are times where actually she's better than I am, so I don't know, I don't wanna be, like, black and white about it, but
Yeah,
as a recipient of that, I too can get frustrated. You know what I mean? Like, I could too
sure.
can be like, "Well, I could've," 'cause I'm in waiting mode. Like, the other day, she was coming over and, I was like, "Okay, well, I'm not gonna start this thing because then I'll get sucked in." And it was like a 10-minute thing, and by the time she was over, it was like 30 minutes later, and so I could have done the thing, and so, yeah, I was a little frustrated and also you know what I mean? Like, I get it from both sides.
Yeah, yeah. I think that term waiting mode is very appropriate because what happened for me is I was fine with the 5 minutes, I was fine with the 10 minutes. I think I was okay with the next time frame, but then because my son showed up and he doesn't live in town and I didn't go out to say hi to him because I figured we were gonna start and I didn't wanna break up our time. And so once we did start, then what my brain does is it looks at the amount of time that I was in waiting mode and that I could have gotten something done. But there's no way to know that from the beginning because that wasn't the expectation. And I think for those of us that like structure and like things to be the same and have internal rules, even if it doesn't feel like we do, these things can be a little bit unsettling. And just recognizing that that's a need and that it's a little bit more challenging, but the world does not meet my needs for time and accommodation. And how do I learn to navigate that? Because if I get dysregulated, that's more time that I need to get regulated. And I really
Mm,
do believe that over time, for the most part, I've really loosened up on this. But a couple of years ago, this was something that was really difficult for me.
yeah.
And I have to say that for other things, if I boil water, I have to stand in the kitchen because if I leave the kitchen, I will forget. When I do laundry, I have to set timers. If I have a few
Mm,
minutes for a client and I decide to do something different, I have to set a timer. I have to log in to where I'm meeting the client because I will lose track of time and not show up where I'm supposed to because I get distracted very easily. So that loss of time, we don't use the word time blindness. We use the word time agnosia. Do you have a different way of pronouncing agnosia?
that's how I pronounce it. I'm not certain if that's quote unquote correct, but that's what I
Yeah.
how I pronounce it.
Yeah, so that's the preferred term to use. So I do have that. It just shows up in different areas, which is why it can be so fascinating that our brains are wired so differently and we struggle with different things and it shows up really differently.
Mhm.
Yeah. Anything else you want
Yeah.
to say about this?
No, I appreciate being able to, like, talk through it and kind of, yeah, just share. I've noticing that sharing, like, my perspective, like, helps me relax a little bit and,
Mhm.
like, feel less, like, shame. Because like, for me,
Mhm.
it's a lot of internalized ableism comes up and, like, you know, I've had many jobs. I've gotten reprimanded for being late. Like, this has been a problem my whole life, and so, right, like, it touches on wounds that are raw and, like, right, it can trigger, like, some internalized ableist thoughts, and so, you know, I appreciate just being able to, like, name it and kinda talk through it. Yeah, I'm noticing there's less frazzledness happening in my nervous system, so,
Oh, I'm glad to hear that. I would
yeah.
say if you're in relationship really with anybody, the ability to talk about what is in the room often is more important than the behavior changing. I'm not talking about things that are egregious or harmful or damaging to relationships. I'm talking about the example of what Alex and I are talking about, but things that come up very frequently. Sometimes we do need to look at behavior changes. If it's upsetting one or both of the partners, then we need to look at that. But for something like this, that on a scale of 1 to 10 is probably where 10 is it's throwing me over the edge, it's probably a 2 or a 3, but it is gonna show up, and having the ability to talk about it and name it is what helps make it manageable.
Yeah, I agree. I
Yeah.
appreciate the space and, you know, like, right, and I think it's hard because it's hard for me to know, like, in relationship, and I appreciate you naming that earlier today before we recorded of I don't need you know, I don't think you said, like, I don't need a behavior change because I think obviously that's ideal, and, like, you named, like, I don't necessarily expect that, but I just wanna talk about it. That, like that helped me feel better too, because then it's like, you know, I can get into this space of, like, I'm constantly disappointing my friend, and, like, I don't
Mhm.
like that, and, like, you know, I think I mentioned it's easier for me to commit to talking about it than it is for me to commit to changing this behavior because I've been working on it my whole life. Yeah, like, I'll continue working on it, and also, like, I just think it's gonna always be a challenge for me.
Mhm. I don't wanna go into discussing this, I just wanna name this briefly, and when we talk about OCD, we can talk about it more. This is how I would imagine it getting played out if you and I didn't have the awareness that we do. You would be late. I would get dysregulated. I would tell myself, you don't care about me. I might not know that that's what's going on, but I feel dysregulated. And the way that I would try and get regulated is to try and control your behavior. If you
Mm,
would just show up on time, then things would be better. And the truth is, even if you showed up on time, I'd get dysregulated about something else, and then I'd make you jump through a bunch of other hoops. But this is often how this gets played out, that we get so focused on the behavior without having the awareness that I'm feeling dysregulated because I feel unimportant. The story I'm telling myself is, I don't
mm,
matter. You don't care about me. I try and
mm,
change your behavior so that I don't feel that way, but that's not really what it's about. So I think that's what can get very complicated in relationships. There's so many
mhm.
nuances, but I want to give you a chance to respond, but I know we can go on a deep dive about this, and I want to pivot as soon as you have a chance to respond.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, right, and I appreciate you naming that, and I think had we not both been, like, doing therapy around our stuff, like, I think for anyone, even people that have done therapy, I think we can fall into that,
Hmm.
kind of putting that those stories that we hold, right? I think it is important to honor that those wounds that are getting activated. Also, I think it's important to do it in a way where it's not trying to control the other person, but kind of like you're saying, like, I need to manage my stuff.
Hmm.
I wanna know as someone in relationship with you if I'm activating your stuff, like, I wanna know that, you know what I mean?
Hmm.
And I think it's different to be able to name it and talk through it than to, like, put that responsibility on the other person
Right.
for your feelings because, yes, we can for sure I don't know, maybe this is, like I think if someone were to take a soundbite of this, it might sound like I'm saying, like, you don't need to care about other people's feelings because that's not what I'm saying at all, but I think that we can get into this dynamic in relationship where we don't really take responsibility for our own stuff and we put that on others. And so I think that's kind of what you're speaking to.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, I'm going to pivot now,
Okay.
and hopefully we'll get to what we intended to talk about. But this is part of it. Alex and I recorded episode 0, and we did the take all the way through. And then Alex said that they wanted to re-record their introduction about their background and skills. So I said, great. I was fine, just keeping mine the way that it was. Alex went ahead and re-recorded their intro. And so when the editor went to edit it, they pulled out what Alex had said on our recording, put in the new intro, and the episode was edited. And I listened to it last night, and it activated some of my really deep insecurities. So I may be a little dramatic in my representation just for the sake of entertainment. But Alex has a tremendous amount of training and background in a lot of things related to autism and OCD. My strengths are what I call from the inside out. I'm very aware of what my experience is and being able to talk about it from a lived experience perspective. My work is very relational. And Alex has the ability to see things from the big perspective, name and label what's going on, and then move to the inside as well. So this is not a one of us is doing it better or not doing it better. But this is the dramatic reading part. When I listened to the episode last night, what it sounded like to me is Alex has a bachelor's and a master's and 5 PhDs and 6 internships and all these research papers. And Patricia plays with dolls.
Mm,
And in reality, I think I talked about having a strong medical background and working with neurodivergent folks. And I thought I could go back in and do a detailed bio and have the editor re-edit it, and I'm going to let it go. I'm sharing this with you because I struggle with comparison.
mm,
I struggle with language a lot, which is why I wanted to do the podcast with Alex, because I'm great at talking about my experience. I'm not always great at naming exactly what it is. I think I do a beautiful job communicating, and we don't necessarily need to have the language, but I'm hoping, a nice blend between the two of us working together. But it really brought up this insecurity of, I don't know what I'm doing and blah, blah, blah.
mm,
I have another podcast, and the day after receiving it, actually, it may have been the same day, and then I got another response today. Somebody who had listened to my other podcast for the first time wrote me this beautiful email saying they hadn't felt so seen and heard, and they cried for 2
Mm,
days, and my words just really touched them. And I've heard that before, and I know that that's my strength. And I want to compare because I want to be able to be all things to everybody. And I know what my gift is, and you have
mm,
your gifts. And hopefully, this will be a nice blend. But for those of you that feel like you're not enough, you don't have the right credentials or experience or whatever, this is true for every one of us. And we can feel that and still do what we need to do.
yeah. Yeah. I appreciate you naming that, and, like, that's really tender, that's coming up for you, and, like, it's I don't know, it's really common for anyone to have that imposter syndrome, and, like,
Mm-hmm.
especially when right, when it's, like, peer to peer, I think it can yeah, there's an opportunity for those things to get activated, and yeah,
Yeah.
it's funny to, like, even hear you say, though, that, like, that's your perspective of me. Because when people are like, "Oh, I've heard about you," or, "I've, like, seen your name," like or, like, they're just impressed with me, I'm like, "Who, me?" Like, I feel like
Mm-hmm.
an imposter a little bit, like,
Mm-hmm.
am I just, I feel like I some of that stuff is performative, and maybe it
Mm-hmm.
is, but I don't think it is, but, like, could be, right? And so, like, it's funny, though I don't know, I just find it interesting, and I don't know where I was going with that, but yeah, I appreciate that you're like, "You know what, I noticed this urge to, like, re-record, and I'm not gonna do that." Like, take some strength to see it and be like, "No, like, it's gonna be imperfect, and, like, I'm gonna be okay with that," and, like, kind of reorienting back to, like, what your strengths are, and yeah, you can't be everything for everyone.
Alex, this is a perfect example. I just got a notification. I have a client that I normally don't see, and I'm supposed to be somewhere else right now. So I need to go.
Okay,
All right, I'll talk to you later and we'll figure
okay.
out what to do with this.
Alright,
Bye.
bye.
Well, hello again. I don't know how abrupt this will feel for you, the listener. I got a notification on my computer while we were recording that I had a client at 2 o'clock my time. It's now 6:30 my time. And Alex and I had talked about that this is really a perfect example of how our deficits in executive functioning show up. This is not a day I normally see clients. I had looked at my calendar this morning and then it just dropped off my radar. And as the day was going on, I often think about what else do I have to do today? And in my mind, I had forgotten I had a client. And as soon as we were done doing our podcasting stuff, I was done for the day. This is pretty normal for us. So when I did, I texted my client and said, on my way. And my clients know, and I said, if I am not there at about 1 minute after, text me because something has happened. And the client was totally fine with it. But this is what happens. And when you work with neurodivergent folks and you're neurodivergent, these are the things that we deal with. And we do it with transparency and honesty. And I find that clients really appreciate the honesty because it just normalizes the things that they struggle with. I see you nodding your head, Alex.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, can I offer a gentle reframe?
Please.
We don't have deficits, we just have differences in the way our brains orient to time, and so we have, nonlinear attention spans, and so, like, that can show up as, like, those that difficulty with time, and, like, I totally get being out of routine. That happened to me a few weeks ago. It was probably more than a few weeks ago, but, like, I had someone scheduled for, like, an hour earlier than I normally do, and I just didn't it just, like, didn't register in my brain because I was just so used to the routine of, like, we meet
Mm-hmm.
at this time, and so, that was the first time I've ever, like, missed an appointment. I try and, like, tell all my therapy participants, like, I have a disclaimer that I read to them that's essentially, I'm probably gonna be late, and so, like, know that it's not because I don't care, it's because, my orientation to time is just different, and so I think they appreciate it, that I can just kinda mirror that, or not mirror, but model that, like,
Mm-hmm.
authenticity and transparency, and yeah, I hope it helps them feel like, "Oh, me too." Like, less
Yeah.
alone in those
Yeah.
challenges.
I really appreciate that reminder about it's a difference. It's not a deficit, it's a difference. We have so much internalized ableism that I love being able to look at language.
Hmm.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
We're going to try and get back on track now. And the last two things we're going to talk about is how we met and any fears or thoughts that we're having about the podcast. I've been talking a lot during this episode, Alex. So if you're okay, I'm going to let you talk a little bit more about how we met.
Yeah. So maybe I'll give a little bit of a backstory. So I was working at a clinic and it was not the most affirming place ever. And I was needing some community. So there's, multiple like Facebook groups for therapists, and one of them is one that was specific to neurodiversity. And I asked in like a chat, I asked in the Facebook group if we could have a chat for like autistic therapists. And apparently it got accidentally approved. They didn't mean to approve it, but they approved it. And my intention was to schedule like a few Zoom meetings because I was just really needing community at the time. I was needing to connect with other autistic therapists and feel less alone in that journey. And so, yeah, that's how I asked to like have Zoom meetings. And I think myself, another person, and you, several people kind of like hosted a few different meetings at the beginning. But yeah, we met, I think, at probably the first one. Maybe it was the second, I'm not sure. But then we kind of did them regularly. And by did, I mean they do happen regularly, about once a month. I'm not sure. Is there anything else to add that you want to add?
Right before we hop back on, I just happened to look at my calendar because I'm trying to reframe I have such a different relationship with time and the length of time that things happen. So I was curious to know, and I looked in my calendar and it just confirms that I am a very slow to warm up person. Do you know how long ago it was that those first Zoom meetings were? Assuming that my calendar, that what I wrote down is the same thing and there wasn't some other group that I was attending.
I would say maybe 2 years ago.
See, you're good at this. I would not have thought it was 2 years. Yeah. And then about a year ago, you and I started connecting and doing Zoom calls one on one and doing some body doubling.
Mm-hmm.
And that just amazes me that it's been 2 years and I really am an incredibly slow to warm up person.
Mm. That's interesting because I don't think that was my experience of you.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I experienced you as like vulnerable from the get go and more in like a group space, but
Mm-hmm.
like, I don't know. I think relationships naturally progress. I know some people kind of get really close with people really quick, and that's fine in D&D too.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess my experience was not that you were slow to warm up because I think you were the one that kind of initiated hey, can we connect outside of here?
Probably. I think it's more of an internal slow to warm up because I show up pretty authentically and vulnerably in most spaces. But I think it takes me a long time internally to feel safe and
Mm.
connected. I don't know how to articulate it. Is there anything else we want to say about how we met or the length of time before we move on to the last topic?
Hmm. I'm not sure. Yeah, we connected on Marco Polo at one point, and then I think at one point I'm like, I don't think I'm gonna be able to keep up with this. Like, I'm
Mm-hmm.
probably gonna forget this app exists. So then I think we figured out kind of a rhythm that worked for us and like a space, a venue to stay connected. And yeah, it shifted over time. And I'm just so grateful that for that space that we are in together and that we were able to connect. And I'm grateful you reached out to be like, hey, can we like connect one on one and like be friends? Because
Oh,
yeah, we
thank you.
wouldn't be here
We
if you
would
hadn't
not be
done that.
here. We would not be here. When we talk about our fears and concerns about the podcast, my sense is that my fears and concerns are very different than yours. And I'll go first if you want.
Sure.
Having had another podcasts, which I still do, but I co-hosted with a very close friend. And in the last, it's been, again, my sense of time, it's been about a year now that I learned that I have OCD, and it shows up primarily in relationships, and it was showing up in this relationship. And the last large part of our relationship with this other person was very, very, very challenging. And I decided to take a break from my other podcast and wasn't going to do another podcast again. When you and I talked about doing a podcast together, I felt very nervous about the way that OCD is healed is in relationship. And I just was really concerned that I would recreate that dynamic. I'm still sorting through what my OCD looks like, how it shows up, how to navigate through it. And when we talk about OCD, I did have a little OCD flare when you and I were in the planning processes of this podcast. And we talked through it, and I felt really proud because the way that we work through it is to work through it. And in this other relationship, I did not have conflict for quite some time. And the fact that we could have conflict and work through it early on was very reassuring to me. Those are more of the concerns that I have about the podcast, because the podcasting space is very familiar to me. I may have others, but I'd love to give you a chance to talk, and maybe that will jiggle something in my brain.
I'm just imagining a kid like with a savings jar that kind of like jiggles the coins free.
Yep.
Yeah, so I would say, yeah, it sounds like they're different, which is right. Like that's okay. We all have our own stuff, and I think one fear I was having that I don't think I voiced to you, Patricia, but I was feeling like I think that the episode we recorded the last one we re-recorded, which will be episode 1.
Mm-hmm.
When folks listen, I think I was just kind of like in an info dumpy space, and I was like, oh, I hope that like potential, like listeners don't think that this is how I show up in therapy. I guess like I'm wanting to like just be mindful of the fact that potential like therapy or assessment participants could listen. And so like, how am I presenting myself?
Mm-hmm.
Am I going to present myself in a way where people might not want to work with me? And so I think one of the fears I'm having is around how I show up, and am I going to turn people off? And I think I'm named at the first episode, but there's a fear around, just self-disclosure and how that might impact the therapeutic relationship.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's fears that I'm going to not be able to keep up with the schedule, but I feel like we've been doing it, so it's probably going to be fine.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I think there's also a fear around saying something and getting canceled.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's a few fears there.
Yeah. There's a huge cancel culture right now, so I hear you about that one. I have some thoughts about some of the things that you shared previously, but I'd like to know, do you just want me to listen, or would you like some feedback? And I'm fine with either way.
I'm open to feedback.
I hear you about your concerns, and I often have felt on my own podcast, why would anybody want to come and see me when I talk about the things that I struggle with? Because I'm afraid that it makes me look incompetent. And what I've learned over time, and I'm not in this solid place all the time, but for a pretty good amount of time, that the right people will find me, and that how I show up will resonate with the right people. If you do an info dump, the people that love info dumps are going to go, oh my gosh, Alex info dumps. And they're going to be drawn towards that. And there's not really a way that you can screw up how you show up, because you're just being authentic. And especially as autistics, because for me, my whole life has been about trying to figure out what is everybody else doing and how can I match that to fit into camouflage. That unmasking is such a huge process of what am I thinking, what am I feeling, and can that be okay? And I can tell you, after almost every episode that I record, after the fact, I think of something that I should have said, I wish I would have said, I would have wanted to say differently. And I've just learned to go, it's okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I hear what you're saying around the people finding, the people that are going to resonate will resonate.
Yeah.
I think the thing that it's not necessarily about not like showing up authentically and not attracting, right? Attracting in just the sense of, right, like attracts like, not of like a, you
Mhm.
know, like romantic attraction. But
Mhm.
I think it's that people will think how I'm showing up on the podcast is how I show up in therapy. I think maybe
Mm.
that's more of the fear,
Mhm.
that they'll assume that, and like I can't control what other people, right, think and their assumptions. So
Mhm.
I can just show up as I show up. And yeah, but it's a helpful reminder nonetheless.
Yeah. There's a big risk and vulnerability in allowing yourself to be seen. I've been doing this for a while and I've just pretty much accepted that this is who I am. And I just want to honor and validate that this is a newer process for you and it may bring up some different things for you. And that's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm having a moment where I'm like, I didn't ask what you needed when you shared your fears. So now I'm wondering, what do you need?
Oh, I think I'm good. I am going to circle back to something that I shared in the first part that between recording and after I saw my client, I went in and was looking at what we need to do to get the episodes out and looking at the show notes. And in the meantime, you've created your bio for all the show notes. I had a resurgence of looking at your bio that is chock full of trainings and all of these
Mm,
things and mine. And I thought, do I want to beef mine up and change it? And I thought, no, I'm just going to leave it and be okay with it. I think one of the gifts about this podcast for me personally and for the listeners is there are some ways that you and I are very similar and there's some ways that you and I are very different. And it allows me and the listeners to see that with our neurodivergent brains, we show up differently. The things that we value sometimes are very different. How we operate is different. And to trust for me that how I show up and what my training and experience is perfectly valid. And I am jelly of your bio and resume. I just am. And that's not a bad
mm.
thing.
Yeah. It's funny because you know, I think I was like very sparse with it at first. And then I'm just having a moment where I'm like remembering you being like, you should like talk about all the things you're trained in.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like I understand, right? The comparison. And I don't know, I think there's so many things that you do well that I'm like, I don't have that skill, or maybe like that skill isn't as fine-tuned for me. And so I think it's harder to like, I think it's just hard to talk about ourselves in
Mm-hmm.
a way that's like like it feels kind of braggy. Like
Mm-hmm.
always feel a little like of conceit whenever I'm like talking about myself, and I'm like, am I really this person?
Mm-hmm.
Like is this just for show, kind of, or like am I, I just have to kind of check my ego. So I think, I imagine if you sat down and thought about it, there would be many more things you could add that maybe aren't like the trainings and stuff, but like
Mm-hmm.
you have skills and life experience that others don't have and I don't have, or maybe I don't have in the same way. And like, it is like, I don't know, it can be uncomfortable to like talk about that, but also like it can feel like, I don't know, a little bit of a competition at times.
Yeah. Yeah. And my hope is that you and I will just model authenticity and whatever
Yep.
comes up. We are a little bit over time. So is there anything that you want to share before we wrap up?
No, I think I'm good. Unless, yeah, is there anything you want to add?
Nope. I think I'm good.
Sweet.
Well, everybody, I hope you're doing well. Anything profound you want to say, Alex?
So, thanks so much for spending time with us in this space where your too muchness is never too much. Remember, you're not broken and you're definitely not alone. We're here to honor the complexity, celebrate the nuance, and walk this neurodivergent path together. You might consider giving us a rating and review on the platform you listen to podcasts. This gives others an opportunity to see our podcast and walk this path along with us. Patricia, are there things that you want to say where people can find you?
If you're interested in working with me or learning more about me, you can reach out to me at unapologeticallysensitive.com.
And for me, Alex, you can find me at the divergentgrovetherapy.com. And that's where you can find me. Until next time, stay curious, stay kind to your nervous system, and stay unapologetically ADHD. You belong here.
Thanks for spending time with us in this space where your too muchness is never too much. Remember, you're not broken and you're definitely not alone. We're here to honor the complexity, celebrate the nuance, and walk this neurodivergent path together.
You might consider giving us a rating and a review on the platform you listen to podcasts. It gives others an opportunity to see our podcast and walk this path with us. Until next time, stay curious, stay kind to your nervous system, and stay unapologetically ADHD. You belong here.